Time for me to introduce our guest for today, and I've been practicing this. Rabbi Olivier BenHaim, right? Oh, I did this. He is with the Alef Meditative Synagogue, which I think is a beautiful thing, Meditative Synagogue. And he's been a student of the Torah and the Jewish way for most of his life. He's lived in Israel for close to 10 years, where he studied in Jerusalem with many teachers on the Jewish spiritual path. He is a teacher of non-dual Judaism, which I'd love to hear about. Rooted in Jewish tradition, he approaches the Torah with a paradigm of spiritual awakening and a lens for exploring one's Jewish identity, and fosters a Jewish spiritual practice, which includes guided and silent meditations, mystical chant, and ecstatic music. And so we're really blessed, because we are still in the High Holy Days, which I can't wait to hear about also. So you've got a lot to talk about. People want to know. So here we go. No, I'll get off, and Rabbi Olivier will take over. Thank you.
Thank you. Shalom. Shalom, shalom, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm so delighted to share this Sunday with you, and to be able to talk. I'm also really glad that the theme for this month is forgiveness, because I came here to talk about forgiveness. And one of the good things about talking about forgiveness is that even if you mess up, you must be forgiven. If that's the practice for the day. So. You set the bar pretty high for me right now, Kathy Ann, because it's really to talk about non-dual Judaism, Kabbalah, and also forgiveness is going to take too much time. So I'm just going to have to come back. I'm just going to have to come back, and we'll do it another time. And you're right, we are exactly in the middle of the High Holy Days. We will conclude this season, this Wednesday night and Thursday all day, for the day called Yom Kippur. And this is a really powerful time that each year, exactly at this time of the year in the fall, when the energies begin to shift, when we start to be a little more indoors and therefore more turning inward from the ecstasy of the summer, right? When we shift those energies, this is the time in our tradition where High Holy Days happen. And the High Holy Days, through this time, sometimes it's about 3 weeks, maybe a little less depending on the year, we spend 3 weeks in deep introspection, looking at our lives, looking at our past, looking at who we are, in this moment of our life, and who we would like to step into becoming or being, transforming, healing, whatever is up for us in our life. And the High Holy Days invite us into this process through 3 major convocations, you would say, through major gatherings. One is called Slichot, which opens the High Holy Days. Then we have, Slichot is also the space we create to transition into those specific energies. Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year. And then we have Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And between Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and Yom Kippur are 10 days. And those days are called the days of awe. And that's the time where not only do we take an account of our lives, but we also begin to engage in the process of forgiveness, forgiving others, atoning for the hurt we have caused, but also, most importantly, forgiving ourselves. The work is also turn inward. And so one of the reasons we are involved in this kind of a work is because this last convocation, the convocation of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is seen in our tradition as, you would say, an annual dress rehearsal of our death. It's a day where we actually show up. We must wear white as if clothed in our last clothing, if you want. We are to neglect the body. It's a day of fasting, not only from food but from drinks as well. We're not supposed to shave or, make ourselves look good. And we really, in the Torah, it says we are supposed to afflict ourselves and to put ourselves physically and emotionally in this state of really contemplating our death. And when you are invited to spend really 25 hours, well, you sleep a little bit in the middle of that, into contemplating your death, you sit in a place where you have to say, okay, what needs closure? What needs healing in my life? What needs to be ending? What needs to be made whole? Right? So it's in this context that we say, what do I need to forgive? What do I need to ask to be forgiven for? And what do I need to forgive myself as well? So that's kind of the big framework in that. And those three convocations, I'm going to talk about each of them separately, are each inviting us into a different step towards that practice. Let's spend just a moment to talk about definitions. How do we define what forgiveness is? Sometimes there are big words like that just sound wonderful, but if we really start to look at them, we're not really sure what it really means. I'm going to tell you two things that forgiveness is not. Forgiving is not. First of all, it is not forgetting. And that's really important to really to start from there. It's an acknowledgement that what happened, happened. That we're not here to ignore it, just to push it out of our mind. That's not what forgiving is. In fact, it is the opposite. It is an acknowledgement that what happened really happened. And the pain that was caused or the pain that we suffered was real. And we are not to deny that at all. That's not what forgiving is about. The second thing that forgiving is not is letting go of healthy boundaries. See, sometimes we think, well, if I forgive somebody, then, we'll be friends again. No, that doesn't mean that at all. When sometimes we've been hurt, when sometimes there's been damage that has been done to us, or we also have done that, or any scenario, forgiving doesn't mean that we run back to the person who's hurt us. No. Now, the opposite is true. We can be deeply forgiving. We can be completely at peace with what happened without denying it did. And yet, that doesn't mean that we need to be back in a hurtful situation. We don't need to re-experience something that caused pain to us. So healthy boundaries are not similar to forgiving. You have to maintain healthy boundaries. There are obviously many definitions of forgiveness, but one that I like, one is actually in the dictionary, I think. I found it some years ago, so I'm no longer very sure where things come to me. But I found it very powerful, and I want to share it with you today. To forgive is to give up the desire or power to punish. And that's kind of a harsh definition, but I want to speak it again. To give up the desire or power to punish. Now we think of ourselves as very kind and compassionate people that walk in the world in a way that is healing, that is wholing, that is inclusive, but we also know that parts of ourselves is this need, this yearning for justice. That whatever has been done to us or in the world, we want the people who have done it to be held accountable and ultimately to be punished. And that's something we need to acknowledge for ourselves. That is truth. That is here for each of us. Sometimes we do that to ourselves. We don't forgive ourselves because we hold on to the idea that I need to be punished for what I have done. I have not paid yet for the harm that I have caused. And oftentimes we even wish for bad things to happen to us so that we can feel that we have expiated this pain that we have caused. Forgiving is about giving up. I love those words, giving up the power, because that power is an illusion, to punish, because we do that. And giving up the power to punish also means that we come to realize that life happens and that people do the best they can, oftentimes in the circumstances in which they found themselves, including us. And that we really are not in control of the river of life that rages through every day of our lives, and that we can't dam that river, shape it in the way we want, though we want so deeply to be able to do that. The other definition of forgiveness to which I gravitate the most is freeing ourselves from the pain we experience from our lack of forgiveness. Again, freeing ourselves from the pain we experience from our lack of forgiveness. That's why I believe that forgiveness is a spiritual journey, a spiritual path of its own. Because ultimately, it is a path of letting go. And on this path, there are many obstacles to overcome. Some of those obstacles are called guilt, self-hatred, and self-condemnation. Those are the ones directed at ourselves, right? You can hear that. Guilt, self-hatred, self-condemnation. But there's other obstacles directed outwardly. Those are resentment, anger, rage, blame, righteous indignation, where we can feel all of those in ourselves. They're all alive and well if we only activate them. And all of those emotions, all of those powerful emotions, when they get activated, they own us. They own us. And then we lose consciousness and we act from those places of anger, rage, self-hatred, blame. And in Kabbalah, I'm going to talk just 1 second about Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, those emotions are seen as what's called in Hebrew klipot, which are shells that we surround our heart with. And those shells harden and harden and harden over the years from our lack of forgiving. And our job really in this practice of forgiveness, in a way, is to let our heart break open. But not our heart, just the shells around the heart. Those walls we have walled ourselves into. Happy are the brokenhearted. Happy are the brokenhearted. So 3 convocation. I'm going to talk of the first one. It's called slichot. Slichot in Hebrew is simply a word that means to forgive. It means pardon. When you bumped into somebody in Israel, the first thing you say, slicha, excuse me. That's really kind of what the word means. And that first step into the high holy days is about to make the conscious choice to forgive, to make the conscious choice to engage in forgiving. And that's not easy. Perhaps that's the hardest. Because again, we want to hold on to that sense of power that I can still be able to punish We want to hold on to that. And to sit there the first night of the high holidays and the rabbi is coming up and is telling us and asking us, are you ready to forgive this year? Maybe you were not ready last year. What about this year? Are you ready to do that this year? Are you ready to free yourself? Again, like I said earlier, from that pain that you experience from not forgiving. Are you ready to do that this year? I am asking you right now, are you ready to do that right now, today, tomorrow, this year? There is something in each of us that feels like they want to hold back, because we feel that if we just walk down that path of forgiving, then we're going to let that other, that person, or ourselves, we're going to let that person off the hook. And we don't want to let them off the hook. But the process of forgiving has nothing to do with letting the other off the hook, and has everything to do with letting ourselves off the hook. Let me explain. That thing that happened to you however many years ago, that if you start thinking about it, hooks into you, triggers those emotions. Even if you see that person, even from afar on the streets someday, suddenly just seeing them just hooks in again. And you feel that emotion, you feel that energy, you feel your body contracting, tensing. You feel the bitterness in your heart. And that person from years back, they might not even know they hurt you. They're not walking around thinking about maybe the harm that they caused you. You are. You are still carrying that person on your back since however many years ago, since you haven't forgiven. You are making your body tense. You are making, in fact, yourself sick from that lack of forgiving. Not forgiving, sometimes I get that image. Not forgiving is like drinking poison, hoping the other person would die. See what I mean? So our lack of forgiveness, in fact, impacts us first and foremost. It bruises our heart. It hurts our feelings. It brings us off center. So the practice of forgiving is releasing those energies. It's releasing and letting go of all of those energies that are triggered every time we think about that event, every time we think about that person, whatever the experience has been. And stop torturing ourselves. In fact, it allows us to release those pent-up energies that are infused in our bones, in our cells, to make room for a different way of being in the world. Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to be that person who holds on to the yearning to punish someone else. I don't want to be that person when I walk around, when I meet the world, when I engage in my life. That's not who I want to be. And so slichot is choosing perhaps to no longer be that person. The second convocation on the day of Rosh Hashanah is what's called mechila, and it's about letting go of our need for the past to have been any different than it was. Simple as that, and as extremely challenging as that, to let go of our need for the past to have been any different than it was. What was. But we are still at war with our past. We are still willing that things that have happened should not have happened, could not have happened. We still wrestle with this. We still feel anxiety towards this. We have not let the past recede in the past. We're living in the present, carrying the past within it. So this day of Rosh Hashanah invites us to let go of that need for what has happened to have been any different than it was. In Hebrew we say, Amen. It is so. It was so. The last convocation is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. And the Day of Atonement invites us into a transformative experience. To take what we have learned from the pain, from the suffering, and to be transformed by our forgiving, to be transformed ourselves, but to transform our lives into actions and being in the world that becomes blessing. I think a lot of therapists, for example, become therapists because of the wound of their past. They've taken that wound, they've taken that suffering and decided to transform it into actions of blessing, to heal whatever they have received, to heal others. And that's the transformative power of Yom Kippur. To take what we have learned, transform ourselves now into the radiant, forgiving beings that we can be. It is also the time for us to, as we ask for forgiveness, to make amends. And when we make amends, we ask others we have hurt what we could do to heal what has happened. And then we go and do it as a commitment to make this world whole and to make our relationship healed. Ultimately, from one of my favorite teachers, and I'm going to leave you with that today, Rabbi Rami Shapiro says that forgiving ultimately isn't something we do. It is something we are. Thank you.